Hey there, philosopher. Ready to dive in?
Always.
All right, today we're tackling internalist versus externalist conceptions of epistemic justification.
Yeah, a big one.
I know, even for you, right? But it's a huge debate in epistemology.
Mhm.
Really fundamental stuff.
Absolutely. It gets right to the heart of what makes our beliefs justified. I mean, that's what you guys think about all the time.
Exactly. And we've got some great material to work with today. Excerpts from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Ah, a classic.
You know it. So our mission today is to unpack these two views, internalism and externalism. See what their strengths and weaknesses are, and explore the arguments philosophers use to defend them.
Because even when a belief seems simple on the surface, like the justification behind it can get really complex.
Okay, so before we jump in, let's just start with the basics. When we say a belief is justified, what are we even talking about?
Well, it starts with the idea that there's usually a basis for our knowledge and justified beliefs. Evidence, reasons, experiences, that sort of thing. The things that make us go, yeah, I think this is right.
Right. Like if I see dark clouds and feel a few raindrops, that's my basis for believing it's about to rain.
Exactly.
Okay, so where do internalism and externalism fit into all of this?
Well, internalism says that for a belief to be justified, you need to be able to access the basis for that belief internally. You need to be aware of it, or at least have the ability to become aware of it through reflection.
So internalism is all about having that connection, that internal connection to the reasons behind your belief.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But then externalism comes along and says, well, not so fast.
Yeah.
Sometimes things outside of your immediate awareness can actually justify your beliefs.
Like what? How can something I'm not even aware of justify what I believe?
Well, think about things like perception or memory. These are generally reliable processes, right?
Right.
But we don't constantly stop to examine how they work. So for externalists, the reliability of these processes, that can be enough for justification, even if we aren't consciously analyzing them.
Interesting. So internalism is about conscious access, while externalism is more about the reliability of the processes that are forming our beliefs, even if those processes are kind of happening in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've got the two main contenders here. But I know it's not quite that simple.
Of course not. It's philosophy.
Right.
Within internalism, there are actually a few different approaches, different, let's call them flavors of internalism.
Flavors of internalism. Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the first one we're going to taste?
Let's start with accessibility internalism. This view really emphasizes the idea that you can become aware of the justification for your belief just by reflecting on it. It's all about the potential for conscious access.
So if I can dig down and figure out the reasons why I believe something, that counts as justification.
That's the basic idea. But, and there's always a but, there are actually weak and strong versions of accessibility internalism.
Okay, philosophers. Always got to add those nuances, don't you?
We can't help ourselves.
So what's the difference between the weak and strong versions?
Let's say you believe that Canada geese migrate south for the winter. And let's say you believe that because someone told you, right? That's your basis for believing it. So weak accessibility internalism would just say that you need to be aware that you were told this.
Okay, simple enough. What about the strong version?
The strong version would say that you need to be aware not only of the fact that you were told this, but also that this being told is the reason why you believe it. Yeah. You need to actually grasp the connection.
So the weak version is just about being aware of the evidence. And the strong version is about understanding how that evidence actually leads to the belief.
Exactly.
And this is where it starts to get really tricky because think about all the decisions we make, especially those split-second decisions. Are we really taking the time to analyze every single piece of evidence in those moments?
Yeah, great point.
Like if you're driving and you have to slam on the brakes, you're not thinking, okay, I perceive an obstacle, therefore I must stop.
Right.
You just react.
Right. You just do it.
And that's kind of where externalism has a point, right? Maybe conscious access isn't always necessary for justification. Maybe sometimes those reliable processes just take over, and we're justified even without meticulously analyzing every single reason why.
Definitely something to consider.
Okay, so this is getting pretty heated. I can definitely see why philosophers are drawn to both sides of this debate. But we've got one more flavor of internalism to try, right?
Right. Let's talk about mentalism.
Mentalism. What's that all about?
Well, this one really focuses on the nature of the justifiers themselves. So mentalism argues that it's your mental states, like your thoughts, experiences, perceptions. Those are the things that ultimately justify your beliefs.
So it's not just about having access to reasons, but those reasons have to actually be grounded in your mind and your mental states.
Exactly. It's all about your internal world, your mental world. That's the bedrock of justified belief according to mentalism. To illustrate this, let's look at a little thought experiment. So we've got two guys, Bob and Ray. They both read a weather forecast that says it's going to be a real scorcher today. And they both form the belief that it's going to be hot out.
Okay, makes sense.
But here's the twist. Only Bob actually goes outside and feels that intense heat for himself.
Ah, I see where this is going. So now Bob's belief is more justified than Ray's, right?
You got it. They started with the same information, but Bob's direct experience, that feeling of the heat, adds an extra layer of justification that Ray just doesn't have. And this seems to support the idea that those mental states, like sensory experiences, they really do play a crucial role in justification.
Yeah, makes sense. Like reading about heat is one thing, but actually feeling it, that's a whole other level of confirmation.
For sure.
But isn't there a potential problem here? What about things like logic and probability? I mean, they play a role in connecting evidence to belief, right?
You've hit on a key point. That's one of the main criticisms of mentalism. Critics would argue that things like logical and probabilistic relations, while definitely important for connecting evidence to belief, they're not mental states themselves. They're more like abstract principles that govern how we reason. So if mentalism is right, and it's only mental states that justify, how do we account for the role of these principles?
Right. It's like mentalism captures the subjective experience of justification, but maybe it misses some of those objective structural elements that are also involved.
Yeah, good point. It's definitely a challenge for mentalists to address.
Okay, so we've talked about accessibility, internalism, and mentalism. What's the last flavor we've got on the menu?
All right, so this one adds a bit of a moral dimension to the whole debate. It's called deontological justification.
Deontological justification. Okay, that sounds intense.
It is. The basic idea is that we have a kind of intellectual duty to form our beliefs responsibly, to base them on good evidence, not just whims or wishful thinking.
So it's not just about what's going on inside our heads, but also about being intellectually responsible.
Yeah, precisely. Like we have an ethical obligation to seek truth, to be honest with ourselves and the evidence.
Right.
So, for example, imagine someone named Maud who's totally convinced that she has clairvoyant powers. You know, like she can see the future.
Right.
Now, let's say she makes some predictions, and against all odds, some of them turn out to be right.
So she's actually right, but she's basing it on this idea of clairvoyance, which, there's no evidence for.
Right, exactly. So even when she gets it right, is she really justified in believing that she has these powers?
Wait, even when she's right, she's not justified. How does that work?
Well, because she's completely ignoring her intellectual duty to be responsible with evidence. It's like her belief might accidentally line up with reality sometimes, but it's not grounded in any kind of rational process. She's basically just lucky, not justified.
It's like she's winning the lottery, but it doesn't mean she's a genius at picking numbers.
Yeah, perfect analogy. So this whole idea of deontological justification is really about being an ethical knower, being intellectually honest with yourself and with the evidence, even when it's tempting to just believe what feels good.
Right, because sometimes the truth can be uncomfortable, and it's easier to just go with what we want to believe.
For sure. And deontological justification is pushing back against that. It's saying that there's more to it than just what's going on in our own heads. There's this element of responsibility, of intellectual integrity.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this idea has some weight to it.
Yeah.
It's like maybe justification isn't solely about duties, but they do seem to play a pretty significant role.
Exactly. It adds another layer of complexity to the whole debate.
All right, so we've spent a good amount of time exploring the internalist side of things. Now let's flip the coin and talk about what makes externalism so appealing. What are some of its strengths?
Well, for one thing, as we've seen, internalist arguments have their fair share of weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
So that definitely gives externalism a bit of a boost. But beyond that, externalism really fits nicely with those reliable process theories we were talking about earlier.
Right, the idea that if our perceptual systems or our memory or whatever process we're talking about, if it's generally accurate, then it can justify our beliefs even if we're not constantly sitting there analyzing how it works.
Exactly. It's about trusting those processes that are, generally reliable.
Right.
So it explains things like those basic principles of perception that we just take for granted. Like, if it seems like you see something, you're probably right. We don't need to do any deep introspection to justify that belief. It's just our reliable perceptual systems are doing the work.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like externalism offers a more grounded, practical view of justification in a way. It's less about constantly scrutinizing our thoughts and more about trusting the processes that are shaping our beliefs in the first place.
That's a great way to put it. Externalism acknowledges that we're not always aware of every single reason for our beliefs, and that's okay. As long as those beliefs are formed through reliable processes, they can still be justified.
So we've really gone deep into this whole internalism versus externalism thing. I bet you're thinking about all the ways this plays out in your own work as a philosopher.
Yeah, it really does touch on so many different areas of epistemology. Like it changes how you evaluate arguments, the role of introspection in your own philosophical practice, even how you approach inquiry itself.
I feel like this deep dive has given me a new perspective on my own philosophical journey.
That's what makes this debate so fascinating. It's not just an abstract puzzle. It has these real implications for how we understand knowledge and rationality and the very foundation of our beliefs.
It's pretty huge.
It is.
Okay, so let's recap really quick for our philosopher friend listening in. Internalism says justification is all about your internal access to reasons. Externalism, it focuses more on those reliable processes that form your beliefs, even if you're not totally aware of them all the time.
Right. And as we've seen, both sides have some really strong arguments, which is why philosophers are still debating this. There's no easy answer.
So where does that leave you, dear listener? As you go forth on your philosophical adventures, which perspective feels more right to you?
Here's a final thought to ponder as you continue to explore this. Imagine you understand the proposition that all cats are mammals. Okay?
Yeah?
Now you come across a creature and you know for sure it's a cat. Does that understanding, just knowing that all cats are mammals, does that automatically lead you to believe that this particular creature is also a mammal?
It seems like a pretty natural inference, like it just kind of follows automatically.
Right? But is that a purely internalist justification? Do you even need to be consciously aware of that logical connection between those two propositions? Or is there maybe something else going on that points us more towards an externalist explanation?
That's a great question to wrestle with. It really highlights how complex this whole issue is, how internal and external factors work together to shape our beliefs. And you know what?
Right.
This has been a great start, but the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring this, keep questioning, keep those philosophical gears turning. That's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. The journey continues.
Until next time.